And then the next level to any of those is, of course, the construction blueprints. That's like where a lot of the details at. Now, that's a next level thing. That's not something that we're going to give the information to the buyer per se, but it's really interesting to look at it that way. So you know, like ceiling heights and true
Mhm.
dimensions of the floor plan from where they're by that center frame. You know,
Yeah, when I first saw the question plate height, I was like,
yeah,
what does that even mean?
yeah, seriously, right? Yeah,
I
good,
told Aaron I printed everything, a lot of stuff out and just put in a binder. And we
good.
drove to Houston the other day, and my boyfriend knows a lot of this stuff. So I was
Sure.
gonna go. I didn't end up doing it, but I was gonna go through and say, hey, what's this mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And
Could I
that's,
understand it? And able to articulate it so the buyer understands it.
yeah, well, for sure. Like, I think what ends up happening, I think you and I talked about a little bit the other day, but we, I mean, you already in just a week know more than any of the realtors do about new construction. And that's even less than what a buyer would, right? Like we're in this industry and we know the nomenclature. And what ends up happening is someone like Ty has to be very careful that he doesn't assume that they understand what they're talking about because they don't. You start getting into mortgages, you start talking about construction stuff like we study it, we're in it all the time. They're not. So I always played like I know, especially when I talk to the husband, because you're dealing with pride and ego here. I would always say, "Hey, I know you probably already know this, and but I didn't, and I just thought I would just mention it." And then that way, it kind of you kind of stroke their ego a little bit and just let them know the information passively, and then he'll be like, "Yeah, I knew that," but he's like, "He didn't," you know. So
Mhm.
it's like kind of playing to both of them, so that way you can be like, "Hey, I'm dense as a rock, and I had to figure it out the hard way." And then they're, self-deprecating humor or something like that. So, um, but I think what you did is good. I think that's probably what Ty did, and that's what I did is just get the binder, start looking at them, and I'm like, okay, I'm really going to focus in on not only do you have series, Sandy, because series will determine usually your included features and what by default comes inside the floor plan as is. Then you start dealing with like, okay, now that you've defined a series, now you're dealing with square feet and increasing incrementally to beds, baths, and maybe garage, first and second story, and all those other things too. And knowing like you've got kind of like the plan that meets the need per series is usually what you try to do when you look at the floor plan lineup. That's usually what we endeavor to do with any builder when we first sit down with them is to try to find holes in the floor plan lineup. Is like, are you missing something that someone's needing by size or by bed, bath, and garage? You know what I mean?
Mm.
And by pulling all the information together and looking at that's the best way, asking the question like, what's a plate height? What the heck is that? But that's something that they're going to be asking as well. So you kind of become someone that can come alongside with them and
Mm.
help explain to them because you were just a week ago didn't understand that. And that there's value to it by doing that too. Not only is it like, hey, these are 9 feet. Now you can explain, a typical plate height for a house is usually 8. And so helping them understand that 9, you now have the volume of the room just feels taller and higher. You have to when anytime you're pointing out a feature, you need to also show its advantage and that being a benefit.
Mhm.
And not just that's what I said feature dumping. I'm not just going to go through and talk about low E argon gas filled windows and Tyvek and cell insulation and what its R rating is. Like you have to help them understand like, well, why? What's it matter to me? Like who cares?
Right.
And sometimes we get into it with the builder and help them realize that might be important to you, but it isn't necessarily to the customer. Sometimes the builders will decide to put a bunch of things in there because they feel like that's important to them and they realize the customer doesn't really want to pay for that. And that's usually where we try to get down to like when we're dealing with the series at the price point is like, okay, we know that at this price point, these people usually expect this in their house. And then at anything beyond that's like, we realize that not everyone wants these, so we offer these items to be an option to add them as not usually saying upgrade, but an optional feature that someone can add. And here's an included item versus a standard. You probably remember that at the beginning of the training. And
Mhm.
professional communicator is kind of talking about those things and helping them understand the value of the things that do come included. And some, I think sometimes you can even use options as ways to overcome those objections, as like, well, um, these cabinets are too small type thing, and then knowing them that you have the ability to um, purchase an upgrade or an optional feature that would help meet the need for that customer instead of them getting stuck. Because the other thing I would say to a lot of that is when people walk inside of a model home, they only know what they see. And so one of the things that you're going to have to get in pretty quick, Sandy, is like, here's what I'll say. Most builders, their model home is the home they're selling, and they usually have a realtor sitting in it, and that's just what they do. That's just the way that it works. So that's why the question is always, how much is this house? How much is
Right.
this home? Is because they're literally selling this home, and once they sell it, they'll move on to the next one and go. And that's not usually the model that we do. It's the model home's not for sale, and you are sitting in this one, and this is one of several floor plans that we have, and a few different series and kind of finding out what their needs so we can peg them in on that and not get cornered in there because what ends up happening is they're like you know how you've probably already known from like some of the training is like those four deadly questions. Like if you don't answer them right, you kind of lost your chance at it, and they don't even understand that you have something at the price point or that you're even building in the area that they do, and that you also have a smaller version of this floor plan. And I know Aaron probably already mentioned it when I was out of the room, but in a lot of the ones that you'll have, there's usually a small, medium, large of those plans, and it's like, hey,
Well, I think small. He said medium, large, and extra large.
yeah, that's probably more accurate in gold for sure. But yeah, starting usually as a single story going up, and then what you'll end up figuring out is there are other floor plans that are similar that you can kind of pivot to. So like people really like the Oxford or what I would call the Redford. It, you can pivot to something called the Stonebrook, which we just added to your website this week. And so that is also added to your your flyers. So if you want to hop in there, you can go in there and look at them. We added Stonebrook, Notting Hill, and Ventana to your floor plan lineup. And a Stonebrook is like a more affordable option to the Redford because the Redford's an expensive one to build. It's just the way that it is. It just costs more to build than a Stonebrook. So they like the idea of the turn island and having the enlarged nook and the cabinets and a large pantry. They can kind of get that, but it's more of in a box. You get what I mean? Where the
Mhm.
master's downstairs and the rest of the bedrooms are upstairs. That can be something that's like, oh, well, this is a lot more affordable than the Redford with the same amount of bedrooms would be. You know what I mean? So you'll start figuring some of those out. And the advantage that you have is you're coming from not all of your plans are ours, but the majority of them are. So we know those like I said, like the back of our hand. So we can kind of help train up on those, like, hey, I don't really know how to present this one. What are the features? I'm going to give you the list that has a lot of them on there. You already have the resource material of the photos, and most of them have a Matterport for you to be able to walk through, which is a big advantage over maybe like Ty that he's got a handful of plans that he's never even seen before. You know what I mean? Um,
Mhm.
so anyway, that's my rant on that. So I say that too, that good job printing them out and looking at them and just starting to spot the differences and just to ask those questions. Of course, that's what the huddle's for. Throw them on there and say, hey, help me understand the difference between this plan or whatever. Your plans that may have already have a few that have sold, or some of them may even be on those lots. If you look at the name of the floor plan, below it will have a number. It'll say like 82 or something like that. That's so you know that's lot 82. I don't like putting lot 82 on it, but 82 means that was lot 82. So that way you have a reference point. Because the way he did them is like that plan's what I built on 82. This one's what we built on 81. This one was 80. Let's build the 80 on 70, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's how some of those are. And so you'll see that on the very bottom. We'll probably phase out a couple of your gold ones to be named the same. So that way we're not dealing with the discrepancies on those. Um, but that way, when you look at your market ready home report, you can kind of line up and know what plan that one was supposed to be on there. And if we don't have one, of course, let us know. We'll just try to get those from Scott and build a flyer for you. So
Okay.
that's it,
Jordan,
guys.
can I ask
Did Jordan
you,
say anything
Jordan, can I
crazy,
ask
you
you a question
guys?
quick first?
What, Ty?
I have a question for Jordan. Yeah, what you got?
Or
I'm
so
here.
I'm trying to. I have blown up my floor plans into like a 2x3 wall clean,
Uh-huh.
and I was trying to get that updated cottonwood and the rawhide done, and they're telling me it's coming out very pixelated because what I'm sending them is just 8x10. Do we have a different version,
I
or
can
is it
all
just
I take them down for print. I can always give you a bigger one. If you're ever wanting to do larger print stuff, just let me know and I'll give you those.
yeah?
And we
I'll basically
changed the cottonwood yesterday, by the way, so don't
yeah.
print it yet.
Thank you.
I sent it yesterday. There's another change that happened again to the
Okay.
hot water heater and the mechanicals in the garage, so I need to update that
I
before I
got I
send
got to correct you, Jordan. Technically, it's not a hot water heater. They heat cold water to make it hot.
it.
It's not a hot because hot water doesn't need to be
That's
heated.
true.
So
Hot water maintainer.
That definitely an oxymoron, huh?
It
And a
is.
hot water maker,
Yeah.
a hot water creator.